Hi, hello everyone. Welcome to the afternoon session of Women Innovate. It's great to see a few faces around. It looks like an intimate session so far, so I'm hoping we'll have a great discussion. My name is Alexandra Juguranu, and I'm from Innovate UK KTN. It's my pleasure and honor to be a chair for today's session, where we get to talk about vulnerability of all things and what it means, and embracing it, and why it matters in business, in leadership, in innovation. So hopefully we'll get a great discussion from our panelists. So I'll go quickly through who we have in the room today, and then I'll invite each of them to say a couple of words about who they are, and then we'll probably just go straight into having a discussion. So I'm really happy to have today Olajide Alabi, Michael Omotosho, Marie Van Hertrik, and Kate Parkinson. So Olajide, hello, good afternoon. Thanks for being here and being one of the speakers. Would you like to say a couple words about you and your business?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's well and happy International Women's Day. So my name's Olajide Alabi, and I own a consultancy with my business partner, my best friend. The consultancy is here to drive change within the equality, equity, and inclusion space, and also touching on specifically how that works in conjunction with well-being in the workplace. Our business started just coming up to 2 years, and we've worked with some incredible and partnered up, even with some incredible businesses, and collaborated on some really cool projects. And yeah, I think for us as a business, we're here to drive change and move the dial. I think when it comes to uncovering our biases, unlearning some of the habits that we have, unlearning some new habits through fun educational workshops, and through creative immersive training experiences. Yeah, that's me.
That's brilliant. Thanks. Good to have you here. Marie, hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me. It's a great privilege to be here. I'm Marie Van Hertrik. I'm the founder and managing director of Neurodiverse Self-Advocacy Partnership. We are a social enterprise helping neurodivergent people to realize their potential. And we do that by managing and creating new mentoring programs that help neurodivergent people into work or with their well-being. And we are also working with employers to help to recruit and retain neurodivergent talent, focusing on autistic people in particular. I myself am autistic, and I came out kind of publicly with this year, and it was a huge and very logical step for me. And I'm also the Women in Innovation Award holder for the previous intake.
Thank you, Marie. Kicking off with some vulnerability there, so thank you. Kate, hi. I know you're on a different time zone, so thanks extra special for being here.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm joining from New York today, so still early here. Thanks for having me. Happy International Women's Day, everyone. My name's Kate Parkinson. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Headset, also an international, an Innovate UK. I've lost the word. It's the Women in Innovation Award. Sorry, it's tip of my tongue. Women in Innovation Award winner. So Headset is a company that was founded a few years ago by myself and my co-founder Ella. We're long-term collaborators, previously working as journalists. And our company was founded to create immersive virtual reality learning experiences for people who work in hostile environments, starting quite logically with journalists, but very quickly we've expanded into other sectors, including humanitarian workers, basically anybody who's traveling to high risk and high stress environments is sort of eligible for our training, immersive training experiences.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Kate. And hi, Michael.
Hi everyone, I'm Michael and happy International Women's Day as well to everyone there. So my company is called Tashu & Co. I'm the founder, and what we focus on is designing products that are inclusive to both worlds. One of the products we've made, which made us a Young Innovator Award recipient, is called Pluggle. Just got it here. So this is what it looks like. So just pull it out like so. So it's basically addressing issues when it comes to disability and how consideration is being addressed within the sector for fully able and non-disabled people as well. So that's what we focus on, and I'm glad to be among amazing people here to chat today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining and for agreeing to speak on this panel session today. So I'll kick us off. I think everyone's been reading so much about vulnerability and knowing about vulnerability, and it's the importance of embracing vulnerability in all areas of life has really gained traction in the last decade. I remember Brené Brown coming up with her very famous now TED Talk in 2010, I think, where she talked about how vulnerability is probably the most accurate way to measure courage, and it's how she defined it. Do you have your own take on what vulnerability is, rather in your personal life or in business, or is it the same concept? Anyone has any first clues?
I would say for me personally, vulnerability is the same at work and outside of work. I think as human beings, we've been taught probably not to show vulnerability because it shows a sign of weakness. But for me, it's the weakness that I think sets us apart. Actually, it's showing that weakness that sets us apart and allows us to then take those risks, and for people to really see who we truly are. And that's important when it comes to business, especially when it comes to building your own business. People buy into people, and the only way you buy into someone is if you truly know who they are. So for me, vulnerability is kind of showing your softer and maybe your weaker sides and taking risk and exposing yourselves to things that potentially could be quite difficult.
And
if I
go ahead, Mary.
I think of vulnerability as a source of authenticity, which draws huge strengths, which confers a huge strength in connecting to your audience, to your customers, and it allows this very genuine, authentic connection, and also a diversity of thought, which is instrumental for innovation and looking at existing problem with a different viewpoint from different perspective, which drives innovation.
Okay.
I totally agree. It's hard to talk about this topic without quoting Brené Brown endlessly, but she says very similar that you simply can't have innovation without vulnerability, and that's something that's core to our business, and I'm sure to everyone else on the panel, because we have to put ourselves out there and be willing to fail, because otherwise there's no chance of success. And that can be really difficult in a business, especially as you were just saying, that we're taught not to show that side. And I would say as a woman, growing up, it was, especially in the industries I was working in, I was a journalist, I was covering a lot of conflict. It was always like, you've got to be tough, you've got to be as tough as the guys. I know that's a gender stereotype, but it's very easy to play into those. But when you step back from it and say, I'm going to be authentic and I'm going to be vulnerable and show my vulnerability, I think that's when you can really succeed in business.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that as well. I think those points are amazing. And one thing I think within innovation as well is I think it allows you to be able to fully experience the issues that you might be tackling or you might be going through, and allows you to embrace it as well. In as much as within a different point of view, you could actually put yourself in that empathy zone of being able being vulnerable to accept and understand what's going through each other's process or mind, or whatever you might call it.
Listening to all of you give your own definitions on vulnerability, it almost feels like it's easy. It feels like you've done this for such a long time and it's easy, but vulnerability is hard, and failure is hard, and authenticity is hard. How do you, in a way, flip the script around the concept of vulnerability or failure from such a negative connotation and the hard thing to embracing it and finding value in vulnerability?
If I may, I think by putting it on the agenda, because by embracing, by disclosing your vulnerability and leading from within, you are leading the conversation. You make often taboo subject very vocal. Neurodiverse self-advocacy was formed by people embracing their vulnerability. You know, we were a group of strangers. We met on an online forum and we had our vulnerability in common, and we decided really to make it the point of our company, and this allows us to connect with our audience, but also to lead the conversation. We can, you know, when I talk about autism publicly, it leads to better understanding, better acceptance, and also changes the narrative. It allows us to leave the narrative, not the negative deficit narrative that is kind of prevalent in the prejudices, but a completely different perspective as a difference that leads to innovation, and different perspective and experience that changes the perception.
I totally agree. If I may, our company, Headset, was founded on what was fundamentally a very vulnerable moment in my life, which I didn't really address for many, many years. And it was only when I did and was open to being vulnerable to myself, and then increasingly publicly, you know, that our business was, you know, founded and able to succeed. If I may share the short story, basically my partner at the time, he's now my husband, and my cameraman at the time, were working in Libya back in 2011, covering the civil war to overthrow Gaddafi. And he was very, very seriously injured. He was hit by a rocket-propelled grenade. And I had the gold standard training for journalists, but in reality, in that moment, my training completely failed me. I froze. I didn't know what to do. If it had been up to me to save his life, I wouldn't have been able to. And no training I had received had prepared me for the emotional impact of dealing with such trauma head on. You know, it took me many years to address that, the psychological impact that had on me, which, being vulnerable here, fundamentally led to me burning out. And I took a step back from journalism. It took about 7 years for me to continue burning, and then eventually burning out. When we founded the company, which was on the premise that there had to be a better way to prepare people who work in these dangerous environments, I found it incredibly difficult to talk about this. I used to get up on stage and tell the story that I'm sharing with you now, and I would be shaking and I would be close to tears, if not in tears. I found that so difficult, but we've spoken about authenticity. And in doing that, people really understood that we were authentic, and our business was driven by deep understanding of the problem that we were trying to solve. I wouldn't say it gets easier. We now have to expose vulnerability in different areas. But that story, just through telling it and through, you know, now running a really successful business that is solving the problem that I had faced myself so many years ago, is just an example of how if you lean into the vulnerability, then you can succeed. As I say, we continue to be vulnerable on a daily basis, but they're different vulnerabilities now. But it's not easy.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, wow, such a powerful example, and I am so glad that your husband recovered, and you're here to tell that story.
I was just going to add, similarly to, I guess, to what everyone else has said, I guess for me, vulnerability really helps to build that kind of empathy and understanding that then allows you to connect with people. And I think it sounds like everyone's got elements of that in the businesses that they are running or and growing. And for me, particularly with what we do and, having these conversations around equality, equity and inclusion, some of the stuff that we talk about is triggering for me, and it takes quite a long time to allow yourself to get vulnerable enough to have those conversations. But by allowing others to see that part of me allows them to put themselves in my shoes or understand the story, and it really then builds that empathy and understanding for everyone involved. The more open we are, I guess, as people, the more we can understand many different aspects of everyone's story. And for the work that I do, it's so important that everyone understands stories and the power of those individual stories as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see Jane in the chat. She also mentioned that it is a paradox. Vulnerability becomes a strength when it can be acknowledged, she says. But by the time we get to acknowledge it, and publicly for that reason, it can take years, decades even. I hope you won't mind, Marie, if I come back to you. You mentioned at the beginning that it was just last year that you came out as neurodivergent. And I assume the road to that place was, well, long, maybe?
Yes, it was I was first, I first heard of autism in 2004, and I completely didn't understand this. I couldn't relate to this because it was in the context of diagnosing my daughter, and stereotypes that existed at the time, which were based on male presentation. And there were questions like, that speaks like a robot, plays with Ninja Turtles. My daughter didn't speak like a robot and didn't play with Ninja Turtles. And actually, that's a stereotype that exclude most. It's not really meaningful, and it's based on an outside kind of observer rather than internal understanding of the lived experience of the condition. And there was another panel discussion, I think Hardeep talked about, when you first hear about when disability affects you personally, you have to reconceptualize and reframe everything. I had to confront my lack of understanding and my prejudices about disability because I absorbed them from the society. I didn't think deeply about these issues about mental conditions, autism, disability, and I had to completely reframe and reconceptualize my perspective on this and draw strengths from this. And one of the things in my experience is that it took me 8 years by advocating for my daughter, it took me 8 years until I actually started talking to the community of autistic adults. Only then did I truly understand the condition and understood that it's a huge source of strength and power, because before that, based on stereotype, I felt that I need to hide and feel ashamed and kind of minimize it and ignore it, while now it's such an integral part of myself that I can embrace it and convert it into strength. And one of the thoughts that occurred to me, we are talking about vulnerability, but my autism is not making me vulnerable per se. It's only vulnerability in the context how it is perceived by society. Yeah, it is on the contact with society that it becomes, actually at the contact with prejudice. Yeah, with some existing perceptions, ideas we receive about what it means or what it doesn't mean. And by talking about it, we move this dial, we can change the perceptions.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in my mid-30s, and I'm glad that we have these discussions now, and that they happen a lot more often, and that a person like me who's still young, early career-ish can identify if anything affects me or affects the people around me, just because I see it a lot more often. I see people advocating for neurodiversity on LinkedIn, for example, and it's very open and it's a lot spoken about. Of course, there's a lot of bias and associated stigma still, and I'm sure we'll keep working towards breaking that stigma for a long time. But just the fact that these conversations are out in the open benefits me personally a great deal.
Can I just say something as well?
Yes.
Just adding to what Maria said as well. I think one thing as well that adds to what vulnerability is in our day-to-day is literally, in my opinion, facing our fears. I think it's so important not to discredit how much fear plays a part with vulnerability. And also, I think it shows how we can face them as well. How we're willing to take on the fear of, you're not good enough, or who are you to come out. Like personally for me, my fear was I wasn't a good enough designer to put an idea out there. And I think it took courage for me to be able to see that through someone actually taking my idea to make it. Something I felt so not worthy of seeing someone else make it. I think that was the moment it triggered for me that, this is more than, who you are in terms of believing the lie that it's in your head. And so I was able to just come out and say, my ideas are valid. I could always do this and not feel that there's going to be shame or I'm going to be embarrassing myself in terms of like putting ideas out there. And that's the switch moment for me. And I think it's important to know how we deal with our fears by coming out with it itself. That's another form, I think. So yeah.
And we're all the richer for you breaking that fear and coming up and presenting your idea so that someone can take this on. So yeah, great. Well done, Michael. Going a bit back to the idea that vulnerability is strength. We associate leadership with strength and with being in power. But we rarely associate leadership with vulnerability. And you're all leaders in your own communities, in your own companies. And I'm very curious how you model vulnerability for others, and how is it that you create a safe space for people to be vulnerable themselves?
If I can jump in, I think that's a really good question. And one of the other panelists said earlier about authenticity, or I think it's come up a few times. And I think we've been looking at that through the lens of presenting our businesses externally. But if you look inwards towards your team, I think it has the same impact. And I think being vulnerable with your team members and allowing space for them to be vulnerable, it makes fundamentally a stronger team. As our business has grown and our team has got bigger, I speak for myself and my co-founder, are very open about, telling each other when things are not okay, but also letting the team know, it's a bit of a rough week at the moment for whatever reason. That might be business related, it might be personal related. I can share a vulnerability of my own. Again, my husband's in Ukraine at the moment. That's a really difficult thing for me to deal with, having been, through traumas with him in the past. So everybody in the team knows that, I'm going through that at the moment, and I'm really upfront about sharing that. And in doing so, that creates a space for our team members to come to us and say when things are not okay. And I think that's a really important thing to allow, because especially at the moment, because we were working remotely even before COVID and continue to do so and will continue to do so. But you miss out on those personal interactions in the office. And so it's super important, we find, to just have these spaces outside of the, very structured Zoom meetings about this topic or that topic, to make space for those sort of water cooler moments. And as I say, just being really open about what's happening in our personal lives, as well as any issues we might be having in business.
I was just going to say that I think for me personally, I think what Kate said there was amazing actually, and thanks for being vulnerable to share your story with us. But one of the things that I think is really important when you're leading with vulnerability is to, like, for me, I like to say I don't know the answers. I don't have all the answers, and sometimes I need to go and find the answers for myself. I think that's really, sometimes it's just about being really honest. When it comes to leadership, sometimes leaders are so quick to just want to fix everything and have the answers for everything. I think it shows more vulnerability when you are honest and say you don't. You have to accept that you might make mistakes as well. And then when you make those mistakes, it's about sharing the learnings and sharing them with your team and sharing like how you've learned and your journey to get to where you are. Those two are really, really quite important points, I think, when it comes to leading with vulnerability, especially, again, in the space in which I work in.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think a consistency, this authenticity that should also translate in the way you interact with your team, the way we share our difficulty. I completely relate to what Kate was saying about having this space outside of the formal Zoom meeting or after or before it to discuss with the team exactly what's happening in their lives and how they are dealing with this. And maybe, we are having a bad day and events have interfered, that's very important.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah,
Acknowledge mistakes, allowing yourself, it's a learning experience for all of us. It's a growing journey, and I don't have all the answers. We have to experiment and learn from it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, I was just going to add to it as well. I think Olajide and Marie and Kate, you guys talked heavily on, just leading by example in the summary as well, and not trying to prove that you know it all. I think consciousness as well is important in terms of how being in leadership and how it affects and relates to the team. It's very vital. Definitely wear your heart to your sleeves if possible, to let people know that you're not the perfect person or go through issues together and stuff. But I think knowing how that would affect the morale of the team also is very important, and how you relate that with them. Again, seeing vulnerability can lead into positive and negative reactions. So it's knowing that we're doing it for the positive reasons rather than it being in a triggering moment where it's, aware of how it's affecting the rest of the team. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely agree. And one of the things I actually have learned along the way from being more vulnerable as a leader is actually saying no. Is learning that you don't always have to say yes to everything. And saying hitting the no button or doesn't mean that you are trying to not please others. Sometimes it's about finding and ensuring that you're doing whatever is going to move the dial the most, rather than just doing all the little tiny things and saying yes to everyone. And it's a work in progress. Like I always say to people, I'm still a work in progress. I'm still learning. I've still got so much learning to do and unlearning to do. And being really honest again with that is just, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm learning as I go along. I'm a work in progress, and I need to start saying no.
Okay, so saying no and being a work in progress are, how do we get comfortable with that? How do we, along the way, find comfort in not knowing, and also in saying no? I mean, I don't, it's just asking myself questions out loud here. I don't really have an answer.
I really love that. When we're sharing documents, it always has the document name and date, and then we'll put WIP, just so everyone knows, this is not a final document. I almost kind of want to change that to my Zoom name. It's like,
yes.
WIP.
That's amazing. I love that. Yeah, I think, absolutely. We're all works in progress, to some degree. Thinking about the no thing, I was wondering, is authenticity and vulnerability, does it mean you're transparent? Is it transparency? And what's the role of boundaries in this whole story? what do we do without boundaries, right? So anyone want to say anything about that?
Boundaries are absolutely essential, and it's about, for me, saying no is staying within a zone where I can function productively, where I'm able to interact with the team productively, and we are progressing. And that means that I'm aware of circumstances, of things I can't do. So I'm just, and pacing myself and being able to, for example, I know that after this conference, I would need some time to rest and recharge. Yeah, I cannot just dive in business as usual. These are very important moments. And, it's interesting. I don't know how other people experience working with autistic people. So I'm still learning about this. Usually people kind of become tense and uncomfortable. It's one of those things that is still, we need to talk more and have visibility of autistic people and neurodivergent people in business, in society, so that people become comfortable. A few decades ago, being gay was a taboo and people don't know how to talk about. Some people today were talking about, people being uncomfortable in an audience of people of color, not knowing what to say, not to offend. So maybe we don't need boundaries in this sense, from the perspective of broader society. It's okay to make mistakes. We don't want this punitive culture where every time people transgress, we weaponize, the errors in language or in understanding. We just, being open and vulnerable in this sense. It's okay to be, discriminatory. That's how you learn not to be.
That all feeds into the whole cancel culture, doesn't it? Really, what you're saying there is, Marie, it's all about, people make mistakes and all of a sudden people are like, well, you're cancelled. That's not actually how. That's number one, not really showing our vulnerable side by having those conversations. And also, it's not really going to move the dial, is it? If you're cancelling people and not having a conversation with someone and being uncomfortable having a conversation with someone, it's something that I have definitely, over the years, have learned how to do a lot better. Which is, you're not not trying to cancel people and having those conversations. But I do think that, the whole saying no thing for me personally is around setting more boundaries around my time, for where I spend my time and who I spend my time with. And when you're running a business, I guess it's really important that you are quite selfish with that, and you do create those boundaries. And again, I think that's in itself, setting those boundaries is a sign of vulnerability as well in itself.
Yes, thank you. We have about 10 minutes left of this session, and I have questions to ask, as many as we are in my head right now. But I just want to open it to everyone else on the call. If you have a question to ask, please just put it in the chat. If you want to address it to one of the speakers or just in general to the panel, you're welcome to do so. I just saw a comment earlier about, where did it come from? From Louise, saying, I used to feel I had to be a different person for different audiences. So it's liberating to know it is okay to be authentic. And then Solen said, yeah, that she also used to wear lots of masks, and it's getting there. It's experimenting with how you present yourself. Any takes on that, on how you are a different people in front of you are a different person in front of different people?
Yeah, definitely. I could share. I mean, from my experience coming from an ethnic minority background, there's this thing during the BL Black Lives Movement era where we talked about code switching and stuff, and how it's so prominent in terms of in terms of positions or seeking leverage within the space you're in. And it got to a stage where, you know, I had to be okay with who I am and how I sound and, you know, the environment I'm in. So I think it's important to just be true to yourself. If it's meant to be, it will be. But I think you should just be mindful of who you're becoming as well and where you come from and what you stand for. I think that's very important in terms of like addressing issues when it comes to areas that you don't feel comfortable in, and you feel like you have to change or you've been forced to change to be accepted. And again, it's a vulnerable part as well of yourself. You know, are you accepting yourself in vulnerability, or are you just doing what people would accept? So yeah, I think personally for me, you know, I just stick to myself and just not let that phase me too much. Again, it's not easy because, you know, if you want something done, if you want a deal done or something, you feel like I have to be worthy of this, and you'd further and change into that position or into that environment. So yeah, stick to yourself.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
I reckon that one as well. Like I similar to you, Michael. I think I lived a long time in my early starts of my career where I was switching up who I was, and actually it comes at absolute detriment to my own well-being and my own mental health, because you are essentially being 2 or 3 different people, and you're one person in the boardroom, you're one person with your friends, one with the work crew. And now it's taking a lot of time and a lot of work for me to realize who I actually am, who I want people to see me as. And that person is the same person that my friends see me as, my mum and dad see me as, and people in the boardroom see me as, because I am one person. I'm Olajide, and I can't be anyone different. And actually, that's how I've built my business, is being vulnerable, being brave, being authentic. And actually, I know a lot of people are talking about, you know, well, actually, you should really be one person in the boardroom, and you should show this professional side to you. And actually, no, I think you should just be you. At the end of the day, like, that's the most important thing to do. If you're switching it up wherever you're going, then you're not authentically being who you deep down want to be. So yeah, I just thought I'd add my little 2 pence in there.
Thank you, Olajide. Yeah, I guess, good takeaway. And the way that we talk so much about allyship in general, and how allies are important in everything, I find that leaders and mentors are so important to model these types of behaviors, and to give you permission to also be that. If you see someone else who's probably a little bit more empowered than you do a certain thing, be in a certain way, then that it kind of gives you permission to do the same. I saw a question from one of our people in the audience today, Emma. She says it's hard to be openly vulnerable in front of investors. I find myself wanting to pretend that I don't need a work-life balance, for example, especially when faced with a room full of rich, middle-aged white men. Any tips?
We're currently fundraising and the round hasn't closed yet, so I don't know whether the strategy is working, but we are being vulnerable in front of investors. I think telling them what you don't know, telling them how we run the company, you know, how we need that work-life balance, how it's okay to take, you know, the weekend off, like that's a normal thing to do. It's okay to close your computer at the end of the day. And as I said, our business sort of from its core was built around being vulnerable. So it's just something that's carried with us. And as you were saying, Olajide, it's you can't be a different person in front of different sectors of the business, whether that's investors internally, the boardroom. So yeah, I'll let you know if it pays off, because we've still got about a month left before the round closes, but so far it's working for us.
Yeah, I was going to add to that as well in terms of like being aware. It's awareness to your environment as well. You know, you can't expect vulnerability to lead you all the way. You know, there are different attributes to the end of vulnerability. It could be positive or negative. It's really the moment, really in the room as well, but not for you to instantly change yourself because of you trying to get something. Still be yourself, but read your environment as well. And again, you know, the trueness of what you're doing will reflect true what you want as well, and you will find the right investors that would really see you for being you. You know, if you're going to change up during an investment pitch or so, once you sign the deal, are you going to remain like that forever? You know, those are things to consider. So be your true self, read the environment in the room, and, you know, let things align for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And good follow-up question from Solen, who asked, it's not always safe to do so. So how do you determine if the person, company, team is that's the right time to and place to share? And if you've ever regretted disclosing certain aspects of your intersectional identity?
Yeah, I think it's always a balancing act, and it's it's a choice. There's no hard answer to this, and I think it's a matter of personal values and where you are in your journey, I guess. But I think it's important. It's turning it into strengths and a unique selling point, because talking of investors, for example, neurodiversity is all about doing things differently. And by disclosing and being open and vulnerable, we are stronger, we are able to be more effective, more innovative, we are providing new solutions, and we are reaching audiences that otherwise are ignored. And this is why we are an interesting investment proposition. So, addressing it's like, for me, it's like a different language. You are still the same person, but you use different language to talk to different audiences.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks,
Veronica makes a really good point in the chat about if investors aren't willing to embrace vulnerability like you are in your business, maybe they're not a good fit. And I think that's so important when you're fundraising. It's not just about the check. And we say upfront, we're a value-led business. If you don't share our values, then let's end the conversation. And I think that goes the same for how you run your business, how you're vulnerable with your business.
Okay, I find that this alignment is a good segue into finishing off this session. We're approaching past, and I know the next. I'm giving everyone on the panel a chance to say one final word, wisdom, advice, whatever you might have for anyone in the audience today.
I'll just go quickly. Vulnerability, I think it's been said before, is the hub for innovation, creativity. It unleashes so many parts of yourself that you're not even aware of. It's like being on the other spectrum, and it will lead you there. And that's what's done for me. So yeah, embrace it, and you'll be amazed by what comes out from it.
Thank you, Michael.
Very quickly, vulnerability we've spoken about this a few times, is about opening yourself up to failure. And one of the things I've learned throughout my life is if you fail, you stand up again and you keep going. So not being afraid to fall over, to fall down, and then just know that you will have the strength inside you to get back up and keep going is something that's really important to carry with you.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah. I'd say just be who you are, be yourself, and do what feels right for you, and that will bear fruit. There will be people there who will meet you.
Thank you so much, Marie.
And I think that just leaves me. I think I'm going to end on a good old Brene, because you just couldn't end it with anything else better than Brene. But vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they're never weakness. Remember that. Like, vulnerability is never a weakness, and courage is neither a weakness either. So stay strong, stay kind, stay brave.
Love it, love it, love it. Thank you so much, Olajide. Thank you, everyone on the panel today. Marie, Kate, Michael, thanks everyone in the audience. And thanks for the support behind the scenes as well. I hope to see you back soon, and for the rest of this conference today. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you
so much.